Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
There are two main types of ignition system. One is the battery ignition system, the other one is magneto ignition system. So let us look at some of these functional requirements. So in battery ignition system, the primary source of energy is a battery, and that battery could be 6 volts or that battery could be 12 volts. Nowadays 42 volt systems are also being promoted. Very old system used to be 6 volt systems, then they were modernized to 12 volt system, and the most modern systems that are being promoted in the whole world now are 42 volt systems, because 42 volts batteries are also available. Most of the engines, most of the spark ignition engines use battery ignition systems. Magneto ignition systems are used for a particular niche application, such as say scooters, such as low end motorbikes, such as racing cars. These are the things where magneto ignition systems are used, but for most other automotive applications you are using battery ignition system. So how does it work? The battery used is charged by a dynamo. Battery needs to be charged, so if you have a battery ignition system, the battery should always be charged, and obviously it will get discharged because it is providing continuous energy for ignition. So it has to be continuously charged as well. So there is a dynamo which is connected to the engine shaft. It generates power online and it keeps on charging the battery on its own. Actually the driver does not even come to know whether the battery is discharging, whether the dynamo is working or not. Everything is autonomous, so you don't have to worry about it, but dynamo is driven by the engine that always generates electricity and charges the battery on the go. So in general, in these battery ignition systems, lead acid battery is used, okay, because they are cheap, easy to maintain and easy to repair. So these are still very popular, and they consist a number of cells which are operated in series. Number of cells depends on how much voltage you want or how much current you want, okay. So there is an ignition switch which is connected to the primary winding of the ignition coil. This ignition switch is what? This ignition switch is the key of the vehicle. So as soon as you put your key in a motorbike or in a car and then you switch it on, all you have done is that you have connected the battery with the ignition system. If you don't switch it on, if you don't put a key in this ignition switch, you can do whatever you want, but the vehicle will never start, okay. So it is connected to primary winding of the primary coil. So you see, this is a sort of a schematic, and this is the battery here, this is the ignition switch, okay, and this is connected to number 3, which is a ignition condenser, and this is connected to number 7, which is the ignition coil, and this is number 4 and 5. 4 is basically contact breaker and breaker point, and then you have the spark plugs for this is a 6-cylinder engine, so you can see 6 different spark plugs, and what is there in the center? This is the distributor. So basically when you put the ignition switch, there is a coil, there is current going in the primary circuit, okay, and then depending on, then there is a capacitor, and whenever this contact is made or broken, okay, one of this is going to get connected. This is a 6-edged cam, so that means in one rotation each one of them will get one chance to fire. So when that happens, you see this capacitor is going to discharge its energy into the primary coil, and then you have large fluctuation in the voltage in the secondary coil. High voltage is generated, and through this it is connected and given to the appropriate cylinder, and then each of this spark plug is going to fire once in a cycle, once in a given engine cycle. Okay. So the demand for cost efficient ignition system led to development of battery ignition system. Initially with a transistorized ignition, the coil current was switched via a transistor to prevent contact erosion. The function is modified by Hall generator or induction pulse type generators. The next step is battery ignition system was electronic ignition, in which controlled operating parameters were used through the ECU. Okay, these are some of the components. Slide is not very clear, but maybe I will make it more clear here. So you can see this is the battery and this is the ignition switch. This is the primary coil, okay, and this is the secondary coil, and this is connected to the center. This is nothing but a distributor. This is connected to the camshaft. Okay, suppose this is 6-cylinder engine. When it rotates, this is the capacitor. So this is going to discharge high voltage and connect to one of them, and whichever is connected, this thing rotates and makes connection once in one rotation cycle. Whichever is connected, there you have plasma formation. So if you look at the components, there is a ballast resistor. The ballast resistor is provided in series with primary windings and is functioning to regulate the primary currents. Okay. So the purpose of the ballast resistor is to prevent the coil from overheating during long operation. Suppose you have to travel 500 kilometers. If you keep on working, this primary coil will get overheated. So what it does is, it regulates that current. It is made of iron wire whose resistance increases very rapidly if certain temperature is exceeded. Okay, and when its resistance increases, it will control the current. So this is how it looks. Okay, with the silicon encapsulation, and there is an aluminum heat sink in the bottom, and when you remove this silicon encapsulation, this is the wire ribbon which is made of iron. So for cold starting, problem is that the battery does not give too much current. If it is a cold winter morning, the battery itself is not giving too much of current. So in that case, there is this resistance is bypassed, so that you allow enough current in the circuit. Okay, so this is more like a safety device. Okay, then you have this ignition coil. So this is how ignition coil looks like. So the current is this is coming from the ignition switch. Basically, it is connecting to the battery. Okay, and this is going to the distributor, and this is going to the contact breaker. Okay, so an ignition coil stores the energy in its magnetic field and delivers this energy when required in the form of ignition pulse. Okay. The purpose of the ignition coil is to step up 6 to 12 volt source to high voltage. How high voltage? It could be anything between 20 to 35 volts, 35 kilovolts. Okay. So obviously this is nothing but it's just working just simply like a step up transformer. All of you know what is the principle of the step up transformer. There is a primary coil, there is a secondary coil, and the ratio of number of turns actually dictates what will be the step up voltage. So primary winding, as you know, we are trying to step up from 6 volt to very high voltage of the order of 20 kilovolts. So primary winding is not really many turns, so it is only 200 to 300 turns and is a very small resistance. The secondary coil, on the other hand, has about 100 times more voltage. Okay, and this whole setup is stored in a very compact cylinder. So if you look at any two-wheeler or any car, you will see that the coil is actually half of this bottle. That's it. It's very small. It's all encapsulated in a metal container. Then one of the important things is contact breaker. The contact breaker is a mechanical device, and its function is making or breaking of the primary circuit of the ignition coil. Okay, so it consists of a fixed metal point and against which another metal point bears, which is passing on a spring loaded arm. So this is fixed metal point here, and there is another spring loaded point. So it basically connects and moves up, open, close, like that. This happens. The metal used in the contact breaker is usually tungsten and has a circular flat face about 3 millimeter. Okay. So, you see this contact point is pivoted here, and why it is moving up? It is a spring loaded thing. So, it is moving up because there is a cam and there is a spring. So, spring is pushing, cam is pushing, so both are pushing in opposite direction. Okay. So, the pivoted arm has a heel or a rounded part of some hard material which bears the cam driven by the engine. So, suppose cam is at the bottom, so cam will push it up, spring will force it down and it will make contact. So, whenever cam is pushing up, it will work against the spring force, otherwise it will be closed. So, this point is subject to very severe hammering during the period of service. So, all the time it is knocking. Okay. If it is a 6-cylinder engine, in one engine cycle it is getting in contact 6 times, and you can imagine if the engine is rotating at 5000 rpm, so every minute it has to operate 5 into 6, 30,000 times it has to hit the base. So, you can imagine it is a very, very stiff requirement, right. So, it is a very mechanically stressed part. Then capacitor. Capacitor, as you know, it stores a lot of energy and discharges instantaneously. Okay. So, a parallel plate capacitor is used which is separated by air. So, normally air capacitor is used. Okay. For several applications, the insulating material is replaced by some other material in order to satisfy the space requirements. The aluminum foils are wound with dielectric material between them, and all the components are housed in a metal housing for protection against the external environment. Then the distributor. So, distributor is used to distribute the ignition surge to individual spark plugs at the correct instant in time. In most cases, a single ignition circuit is used. So, even if you have a multi-cylinder engine, you use only a single ignition circuit and a distributor unit which is combined with contact breaker for compactness. So, instead of having 6 ignition circuit, you use only 1 and a distributor. So, only one single ignition circuit is used. Now, there are 2 types, one is the brush type. So, the brush type uses the same idea which is used in fans. Okay. There is a carbon brush which is carried on a rotor arm slides over metallic segments embedded in the distributor cap, and then there is a gas type. So, in the gas type, the electrode of rotor arm passes close, so it does not contact, does not make physical contact. It is only a proximity type and does not actually contact the segment for distributor cap. Okay. Then the most stressed part in a ignition system is spark plug. Now, what is a spark plug? All of you have seen this, how it looks from outside. Okay. What you may not have seen is how it looks internally. So, it looks very complex from outside, but it is actually quite simple, but its requirements are also quite stringent, I will just tell you. So, here this end is going into the cylinder head and this is in the combustion chamber. So, this part is generally exposed to very high temperatures and pressure, and you have to make sure that no gas leaks from here. Okay. Now, if you look at it, there are 2 electrodes. One is this outer electrode which is connected to this. So, this is ground electrode, okay, because it is connected on the body of the engine. So, it is ground, and then you have this central electrode. Okay. This central electrode is made of some special metals, and you can see this special design here. That is because this whole thing gets heated up, and when it gets heated up, it expands or contracts. So, this is nothing but to absorb that expansion. Okay. And then you see this electrode should not be in touch with this or anywhere in the body. So, there is a ceramic insulation which makes sure that it is inside the housing, but it is not in physical contact. Okay. And then on top of it, you have this connector where you are going to connect your lead, which is coming from the distributor system, which is bringing you high voltage. This is where you apply your high voltage of the order of 20 to 35 kilovolts. So, when you apply 20 to 35 kilovolts, this becomes charged and this is grounded. So, the plasma is generated here in between those 2 gaps. Okay. So, a spark plug provides two electrodes with proper gap across which a high potential discharge is generated to create a spark and ignite the mixture. It consists of a steel shell. So, you can see this whole thing is covered in steel shell, an insulator. So, this is the insulator and two electrodes. Okay. The central electrode which is connected to the power supply is well insulated by a ceramic material. So, the ceramic material is a very bad conductor of electricity. So, it does not allow any crosstalk between these two electrodes, although they are concentric. Okay. The other electrode is welded to the shell and ground when the plug is installed. So, as soon as you install this electrode actually is grounded. So, this slide essentially shows you the history of evolution of spark plugs over the 100 years, starting with 1902 and going all the way to 2002. And the spark plugs were very bulky in the beginning. They were quite huge in their size. Materials were not that strong, and now we have very strong materials available, very suitable materials available. So, most of the applications we are using M14 spark plugs, but now the trend is that now people are going for smaller and smaller electrodes. So, M8 electrodes have also come into production in automotive sector. So, if you look at the spark plugs, the electrodes are usually made of nickel and copper alloys, because they have to undergo a lot of thermal and chemical stresses. They have to withstand severe erosion and corrosion. Conditions that they are exposed to are extremely severe. The tip of the spark plug electrode is actually undergoing a huge amount of thermal electrical stresses. So, you have very high voltage applied between these two electrodes, which are almost 0.5 to 0.75 millimeter apart, and you are applying voltage which are as high as 20 kilovolt to 35 kilovolts in fraction of seconds, and you are generating electrical plasma which is very hot. So, and this is in addition to exposure to hot gases, and alternatively in every cycle they, apart from hot gases, they are also exposed to cold gases. So, as a result, you know, the cyclic thermal stresses are there. So, tip of the central electrode and insulator both are exposed to combustion gases and thermal stresses, and that leads to actually cracks in the ceramic material insulators. The insulators are also sometimes affected by moisture, because moisture is a combustion product, formation of which takes place in the combustion chamber. Sometimes there are deposits in the engine combustion chamber, and sometimes there is knocking, and there is knocking related combustion chamber deposit also in the combustion chamber, that also affects the insulators. So, therefore, it is essential that the insulators are kept cooler. So, the heat that is gained by them from all these sources must be dissipated to the outer shell, and therefore, you know, insulator it should be possible for the insulator to lose the heat to the outer shell, and which finally in turn transfers the heat to the engine cylinder head. Okay. And if you look at how they go bad, you know, most of the spark plugs, they are often fouled by deposition of carbon, deposition of oil. When you have too much of the oil and carbon deposits, the spark becomes irregular, and then you have to go to the garage and get it cleaned, so that the spark plugs start working effectively again. So, if you look at the requirements, what are the requirements? There are mechanical performance related requirements, and then there are chemical performance related requirements, and then there are thermal performance related requirements. So, let us first look at the first set of requirements of a spark plug. So, if you look at mechanical performance related requirements, so the spark plug should be able to withstand the periodic pressure peaks in the combustion chamber, because in the combustion chamber in one cycle the pressure can vary from somewhere subatmospheric pressure to 60, 70, 100 bar, depending on what is the compression ratio. So, it should be able to withstand all these pressure peaks, and also, you know, there is very high resistance to mechanical stress that is also required from from the ceramic insulator. It should not really be affected by mechanical stresses and crumble or cracks should not develop in that. If you look at the chemical performance related requirements, the spark plug is exposed to all kinds of combustion reactions, which are essentially chemical reactions that are taking place at extremely high temperatures. So, the spark plug should be able to withstand all these chemical reactions. There are many acidic gases that are formed. Then there is a formation of deposits, carbon deposits due to combustion of the fuel or incomplete combustion of the fuel. So, all these deposits and the chemical species that are formed also affect the performance characteristics, and spark plug are supposed to resist the chemical attack. Then there is thermal performance related requirements. So, if you look at the engine operation, this spark plug absorbs the heat from the hot gases, and then in every cycle it is exposed to cooler air, intake air, which is at room temperature and 20 times in 1 second depending on the speed, and therefore, there is large amount of thermal shock. You are alternative doing cold and hot, cold and hot exposure to the electrodes, and they should be able to withstand such a severe condition. And then, as I said earlier, a spark plug must be able to dissipate the heat that is absorbed to the cylinder head with maximum efficiency. It should very seamlessly transfer all the heat that is gained because of the combustion to the cylinder head, so that the terminal end of the spark plug they should remain cool, and the cables etc. Do not start burning and malfunctioning. If you look at the design of the combustion chamber, on the top there is this is the stud where you are going to connect the cable. So, high voltage cable is connected here. Then you have this this place which is alumina ceramic based insulator. The function is that this is connected to the central electrode, and all this outer shell is connected to the body of the cylinder head or body of the engine, which is grounded, and this is exposed to very high voltage. So, the idea is that these two should remain insulated electrically, and that is why this alumina ceramic comes into the picture. So, it is there in the almost entire length of the spark plug, so that they are electrically separated. And then there is shell, this whole thing is shell, and then here you have the heat shrinkage zone, where if the thermal expansion of the spark plug takes place because of the heating, it should be able to accommodate that. And then here inside this you have conductive glass, and the idea is that this electrode and this stud should have some flexibility against the thermal expansion. And then here you have the threads using which you tighten the spark plug into the cylinder head, and here you have the composite central electrode. This is also made of nickel copper alloys, and then there is some breathing space here for cooling purposes, and then you have this ground electrode. Ground electrode is also made of nickel and copper composite. So, this is particularly a design of the spark plug. So, if you look at the terminal stud, this is terminal stud is mounted in gas tight in the insulator with the electrical conductive glass seal, which also establishes the connection to the central electrode. The function of the insulator is to insulate the central electrode from the terminal stud of the shell electrically. The surface of the insulator terminal end is coated with lead free glazed glass, okay, which prevents the attack of the moisture and contaminants. If you look at the shell, how do you manufacture it? It is manufactured by cold forming processes, and it is manufactured, the material that is used is steel, and then once you form the shell, you are going to electrically nickel plate it, electroplating. And why you do it? You want to prevent the corrosion, because as I mentioned earlier, in an engine you have iron containing compounds. The spark plug is made of iron containing compounds. you have high temperature available, you have air available, and if there is any moisture, it is going to lead to corrosion. So, corrosion should not take place. In order to protect it against corrosion, you are going to electroplate it with nickel. And also, since the corrosion does not take place, you can very easily take it out from the cylinder head. Then there is sealing seat. There are two types of sealing seats are available. So, one is the flat sealing seat and the other one is conical sealing seat. So, here you can see this is a flat seal, and if you look at this zone, there is a washer here which is made of softer material, and when you tighten this thread into the cylinder head, this seal, this washer actually makes sure that there is no leakage past here. Okay, so this is stopped by this seal. The other design is that you have this conical shell. Okay, so this sits in the seat which is machined in the cylinder head, and this seat also makes sure that there is no leakage past. So these are the two designs as far as the seat seal is concerned. Okay, and both are used in practice. And then if you look at the central electrode, so central electrode includes a copper core for corrosion. But if you look at the ground electrode, there are several designs of ground electrode. So this one here is the central electrode and pretty much same in all designs. But if you look at the ground electrode, which is via this shell, it is connected to the cylinder head, it has several designs. So you can see here, this is the front electrode which is mostly used in two-wheelers and four-wheelers. But then for some applications, you have such a 4 fingers of the side electrode, and in another design you have this kind of a circular periphery around the which is acting as a ground electrode. So this is called surface gap electrode. So these are 3 different designs which are extremely popular for different applications. Now if you look at the working, so this is the schematic of the battery ignition system. So obviously if you look at here, this is the battery. This could be a 6 volt, 12 volt, and now in future there is going to be 48 volt technology in which people are working. So if you look at the positive electrode, there is a switch. So this switch is nothing but the key that you put into your vehicle, and then through a ballast it is connected to the primary coil. And when this circuit is closed, the current is flowing through the primary coil, and then when you open it, the capacitor gets charged. And once the capacitor gets charged, what happens is that when you open this, once this is fully charged, the charge flows back and goes into the primary current, and that induces the secondary high voltage into the transformer. And here the high voltage of the order of 15 to 35 kilovolt is generated. From there, this electrical voltage comes to this distributor, and this distributor, depending on the number of cylinders, has different spark plugs connected to it. So this distributor connects one spark plug at one time. So suppose this is the spark plug that is connected at this point. So once this connection is established, this high voltage is applied here, and this is where the spark will take place. And this is connected to the crankshaft of the engine, so it will move, and once it moves and connects here, then the spark will take place here, and then it will take place here, and then it will take place here. So if it is a 6-cylinder engine, there will be 6 such spark plugs and 6 stations here. If it is a single cylinder engine, then there will be only one spark plug. So this is connected to the crankshaft, cam is also connected to the camshaft, and using this arrangement, it makes sure that in one engine cycle you are applying spark one time in one engine cycle. So if you look at the working, one end of the primary winding is connected to the positive, as I mentioned, and the other one is grounded through the contact breaker. When the ignition switch is closed, the primary circuit is closed through breaker, and then the primary current flows. When the breaker opens, this current actually flows through the capacitor. So here, if this is open and not going to ground, then this capacitor is charged here, and then when the breaker open, the current flowing through the points now moves to the condenser, and condenser charges, and then the magnetic field collapses. And the collapse of this magnetic field actually is going to induce the voltage in the primary winding, which charges the condenser to a much higher voltage than the battery, and then the condenser then discharges So the current starts flowing in the reverse direction, and then primary current flows through the coil, and then this rapid collapse and reverse of the magnetic field in the core, it induces very high voltage in the secondary coil, as I mentioned here. So in the secondary coil, very high voltage will be generated, and this then is then distributed to different spark plugs. Now, one of the important aspects of the battery ignition system is the dual angle. Let us understand what is this dual angle. So as I mentioned earlier, so it is basically a period that is mentioned in degree of the cam rotation, which the contact points remain close. So if you look at this cam, how much this is going to close or how much this is going to open is going to decide how much will be the charging and what will be the voltage in the primary coil and what will be the secondary voltage in the secondary coil. So it is the period that is mentioned in degree of the cam rotation for the time for which the contact points remains closed and the circuit is closed. So it must be sufficiently large to allow the magnetic saturation of the coil. It depends on the gap between the contact points and the angle. So this is the cam lobe, okay, and so this is actually not a very regular shape. This is shaped like this. So for some time this is open and then for some time it is closed. So it depends on the gap between contact points. For a single contact point, for a single contact breaker, the number of lobes depends on number of cylinders. So if it is like a 4-cylinder engine, then this contact point should be collapsed 4 times in one rotation of the camshaft actually. If it is 6-cylinder, then it could be 6 times in a cylinder. So as the number of cylinders is increased, the dual angle should be reduced, because ultimately you are rotating only 360 degrees. So in a 4-cylinder engine, generally the dual angle is of the order of 50 degree. In a 6-cylinder engine, it is 38. So I mean, when you have smaller dual, the smaller is the gap between the contact point. When they are fully open, the larger is the dual angle, and vice versa. So larger gap will make sure that the dual angle is small. So twin contact breakers are connected. So sometimes if you have very large number of cylinders, so when you are not able to handle with one contact breaker, you are going to use 2 contact breaker in place of 1 and run them in parallel between primary winding and the earth, and then the number of lobes on the cam can be reduced. Say for example, if you are using one single lobe 38 degree on one camshaft, then you have to have 38 degree only the dual angle. But if you use 2 of them in parallel, you can probably increase the dual angle and they can run in parallel controlling 3. One is going to control 3 cylinders, the other one is going to control the other 3 cylinders. So that really helps. If you look at the battery ignition systems, earlier most of the battery ignition systems used to be based on 6-volt battery, but now they are most of the applications 12-volt batteries are used, and there are obviously various advantages of 12-volt systems. So older vehicles used to have 6-volt, and if you have a low voltage, obviously the battery will be small. If you have a higher voltage, the battery will be large. So now what is happening is that people are becoming more and more conscious about emissions and also about the efficiency. So the compression ratios of the vehicles is going up, and once you have higher compression ratio, you need to apply higher voltage in order to ignite them, and in order to do that, you need higher primary voltage as well. So 12-volt battery use actually helps you in that, and once you have higher voltage, you are actually reducing the amount of current that you have to supply for successful ignition. So when you reduce the current, you are actually reducing the thickness of the cable that you are using, and the chances of failure also reduce. So this is the reason why 12-volt is used, and this is also the reason why people are trying to move towards 48-volt battery system in foreseeable future. But there are certain limitations of 12-volt ignition systems. For example, the primary voltage decreases with increase in engine speed, because there is a limitation in terms of current switching capability of the breaker. The second limitation is that the dwell period becomes very short if you are running the engine at a very high speed. The third limitation is that the system is sensitive to side tracking because of the high source impedance, and the last limitation of this is that the breaker points are subjected to lot of mechanical and electrical wear because they have to impact each other. They on the contact point hammers the seat very hard at high speeds, and this leads to mechanical and electrical stresses on them. So, this is all about the battery ignition system. Let me just talk very briefly about the magneto ignition systems. So, before we start doing magneto ignition system, I would just like to tell you these are some of the oldest ignition system. They do not require battery. Magneto means you are generating electricity on the go. There is nothing stored. So, if you look at the old scooters from those who must have driven the kickstart scooters, there is no battery there. Bajaj and Priya and Super Scooter, they don't have battery. They use this kind of a ignition system. Okay. So, what is this? The magneto ignition system use its own electricity generator to provide the necessary energy for the ignition. So, it generates electricity on the go and uses it for ignition. There is no stored energy no stored electrical energy in a battery here because there is no battery. So, when rotated by the engine, it produces high voltage and therefore it does not require battery. So, how it works? So, basically you see there is a ignition switch, okay, there is a condenser here, and then there is some kind of a mechanism where you have these contact points, contact breakers, just like we discussed earlier in the battery system, and then there is a cam system which is connected to a rotating 2-pole magnet. Okay, this is a rotor, and this is a coil. So, when this rotor rotates inside these coils, it is going to generate electricity. It is nothing but the same principle as that of a electrical generator. The only thing is that the size here is going to be very small. Okay. So, here you see this is again connected to a distributor, and then distributor is connected to number of cylinders, whatever number of cylinders you have in your engine. So, when this rotates, the electricity is generated, and this is high voltage electricity that is being generated, and then it is connected to the distributor and it fires. Okay, primary coils and secondary coils both are given here. This is primary coil is given in the solid line, and the secondary coil is given in the dotted line. Okay. So, there is no requirement of a separate coil to step up the voltage, because here you can do step up. This is a high voltage generator. Rotating armature type has the armature consists of primary and secondary windings, and it rotates about the poles of a permanent magnet. Rotating magnet type involves the use of a rotating magnet, and the coils are kept stationary. As I mentioned here, the coils are kept stationary, and this is permanent magnet is rotated. Okay. Polar inductor type magneto, where both the magnet and the windings are kept stationary, but the voltage is generated by reversing the flux field with the help of inductors. Since the initial speed in the engine, so how do you start the engine? So, you basically kick start the engine. So, at that time the engine speed is very small. Okay. So, initial speed of the engine during starting is very low or very slow. So, the current generated by magnet also is very small. Okay. So, as the engine speed increases, the current generated will also increase. In the beginning, it is only enough to start the engine, but as the engine picks up, you are generating more and more electricity. So, basically it increases gradually with increase in the engine speed. So, it is generally used in higher speed applications. A battery ignition system is favored due to its reliability, but in two-wheeler applications, magneto is favored due to its lightweight. Okay, especially for cheaper two-wheelers, this is a preferred mode. So, here you can see that this is the speed here, and this is the current. Okay, and you can see the magneto current actually is very small in the beginning, and as the speed picks up, the magneto current goes up, and this is the battery coil voltage, which is more or less, it does not fluctuate that much. So, if we compare the battery ignition system with the magneto ignition system, main features. So, in battery ignition system, battery is essential, and there are difficulties that can happen because of the battery discharge. You have to jump start sometimes. The battery has to be changed periodically after 2 or 3 years. In magneto-ignition system, there is no problem. Battery is not required, hence there is no discharge issues. Okay. Ignition system with using batteries are difficult to maintain because you have to keep on replacing. Your battery should be powerful enough, it stores enough charge. Magneto systems, they are easy to store, maintain. There is not much of maintenance requirement. But the thing is that battery ignition system, a good spark is available even at low engine speed. In this case, the quality of spark is not good during the starting because the engine speed is very low, so you are not generating enough current. So the quality of spark in the beginning is not going to be as powerful. So this is the flip side of the magneto system. Then efficiency of the system decreases with engine speed, increasing engine speed, because you have to then discharge more frequently. Here the efficiency of the system increases with increasing engine speed. Okay. This requires more space obviously because you have to store battery and coils and whatnot, and this requires much less space. This is mainly employed in cars and commercial vehicles obviously because you cannot kick start them. Engines are simply too big. Okay. And these are mainly used in race cars and two-wheelers. Race cars also there is a weight constant. Okay. And they are normally high speed applications. So since they are high speeds, the magneto system works quite well at higher speeds. Okay. So this is as far as the conventional ignition systems are concerned. Let's quickly look at modern ignition systems, and I'll be really quick in this. The major limitation of the breaker operated ignition system is decrease in available voltage due to limitations in current switching capability of the breaker system. So breaker system is still a mechanical system, so it's rather slow here. The continuous mechanical and electrical wear is another major issue with these conventional systems. So to overcome these advantages, now the advantage is that we have lot of good electronic components available, and in using the ICs we can do a lot of functions which were not possible otherwise, and we had to use contact breakers and other things. But now because of various electronic components being available, they are cheap and they are pretty robust and reliable. So to overcome this disadvantage, modern day vehicles use electronic circuits in ignition systems, and roughly they are divided in two types. One is the transistoride coil ignition, also called TCI. So in many of the vehicles you must have seen TCI put as model or model name. So TCI just means transistorized coil ignition. In some vehicles you must have seen CDI being used. CDI is capacitive discharge ignition. So I'll very quickly tell you this is how a TCI system looks like. The contact breaker and the cam assembly of conventional system are replaced by a magnetic pulse generating system which detects the distributor location and sends the signal to the control module. So here you see there is a battery, then there is a ignition coil, then there is a capacitor, and then you have a complex electronic circuit which basically contains pulse shaping circuit, which contains dual angle control system, which contains a regulator and a driver stage, and then you have secondary circuit which is nothing but a switching output stage. So all this basically controls, and all of them go to this ignition coil where the voltage is increased, and then there is a distributor. So the distributor is still there, okay, and so this is going to basically control the current of in the coil, and then it is also going to control the timing, and the distributor is going to physically distribute the high voltage current into these spark plugs, multiple spark plugs. So this is how a TCI system looks like. Okay, so the module switches off the flow of current in primary coil, inducing high voltage in the secondary coils. The control module contains the timing circuit which controls the buildup of the current in the primary coil, and generally a magnetic pulse generator, a gear with number of teeth equal to number of cylinders is used, which is driven by a distributor shaft. The voltage first increases then decreases as the tooth passes the magnet. The control module uses this information to supply the current in the primary circuit. Primary circuit generates the secondary high voltage which is connected to the appropriate spark plug system by the distributor, and the spark is generated. Coming to CDI system, this is capacitive discharge ignition system. So here you have a battery, a circuit, and then you have electronic circuit where you have pulse mapping circuit, control unit, charging device, some capacitor combinations, and this is connected to ignition transformer. Then it goes to the distributor, and same thing which we have been seeing, like it is a distributor that is connected to multiple number of spark plugs. Okay, so this is how a CDI system looks like. So the ignition transformer steps up the primary voltage at the time of spark by the discharge of capacitor to the thyristors. Now thyristors are solid state devices which allow only one way flow of the current. Okay, and these are basically for controlling high current. So high current, how much current is going, is controlled using thyristors. A CDI box contains capacitors, thyristor power switch, charging device, pulse shaping unit, and control unit. It is insensitive to the electrical shunts resulting from spark plug fouling. So because of fast capacitive discharge, the spark is very short, which leads to ignition failure during lean operating conditions. So CDI system is successful in homogeneous conditions, but when it comes to lean, this system is not a very preferred system of choice. Okay, now let's come to the firing order. Suppose these are your bearings and these are your 4 cylinders, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and this is the distributor. So a number of possibilities of firing order depends on the number of cylinders and throws of crankshaft, how many times the crankshaft rotates. In general, it is required to keep power impulse equally spaced. Other factors that need to be considered are engine vibration, engine cooling, and development of the back pressure. So how many combinations are possible? In this, there are many combinations that are possible. For example, in a 4-cylinder engine, if cylinder 2 is fired after cylinder 1, there will be imbalance in the loads of the 2 bearing, A and B in the shown bearings. So this bearing. So what we try to do is we try to balance the bearings as well. So if we fire 1 here, so either we have to fire 3 or 4. If we have to, so obviously we will prefer to fire 3 because these are on the opposite side. Okay, so either it could be 1, 3, 4, 2 or 1, 2, 4, 3. Okay, so whereas in the if cylinder 3 is fired, then cylinder 1 and then the load is evenly distributed. Firing of alternate cylinder also tackles the issue of overheating of the engine as the heat is transferred more evenly throughout the engine cylinder. This also helps in reducing the back pressure built at the exhaust. The common firing orders that are used for 4-cylinder engine is 1, 3, 4, 2 or 1, 2, 4, 3. If you have a 6-cylinder engine, these are the firing orders. You did not remember it, but this just to show that how to sequence the firing of the cylinders, and this is decided by the distributor. And then obviously you have to time the opening and closing and filling or emptying of the cylinders accordingly. So you decide the firing order and then. Now you see, as I was telling you, that if you rotate the engine at different speeds, the optimum time at which you should supply this spark also varies. I give you an example. Suppose you are operating at 1000 RPM. So spark advance of 12.5 degree is more than enough. Because this 12.5 degree, when you calculate in terms of absolute time, is quite a bit. If you want to translate the same thing into 2000 RPM, this will not work. Because there 12.5 degree means half the time in terms of millisecond. So then what you need to do is you need to advance the spark timing. So depending on what speed you are operating, the spark timing always need to be advanced if you are increasing the engine speed, and it needs to be retarded if you are reducing the engine speed. So the purpose of the spark advance mechanism is to ensure that spark takes place at most favorable condition all the time. Most of the engine are fitted with advanced mechanism which is integrated to the distributor. 2 mechanisms are used. One is called centrifugal advance mechanism and vacuum advance mechanism. Okay, so let's look at this. Centrifugal advance mechanism. So this is the cam. Okay, this is the weight return spring. When you rotate it fast, then what will happen? This arm will come out because of the inertia. Okay, so when you rotate it fast, this comes out and this will advance the spark timing. right. So, the cam is mounted on the distributor shaft, so that as the speed increases, the flywheel shifts the cam in the direction of shaft rotation. Okay. As a result, the cam lobe makes contact with the breaker lever, thus shifting the ignition point. The weights are held in their position by retaining springs, which are shown here. It is used for full throttle conditions. Coming to the second mechanism, advanced vacuum mechanism. So, here you see here the mechanism is designed such that the operation results in a prescribed part load advance curve at part throttle condition. So, when you have a part throttle condition, at that time there is a vacuum in the intake manifold, right. So, that vacuum is given here through a hose, and this is a diaphragm, this is a diaphragm here, and this is the enclosure. So, when the vacuum is created, then what will happen? This spring will be pulled back, and once it is pulled back, this lever is also pulled back, and once this lever is pulled back, this is going to affect the movable breaker plate, and that is how you adjust the timing. So, the diaphragm of the vacuum unit is moved by changes in the gas pressure, and its position is determined by the differential pressure at any movement between the prevailing vacuum and the atmospheric pressure. So, how much is the pressure difference? That is going to determine what will be the position of the diaphragm. If it is atmospheric pressure, it will remain straight. If it is sub-atmospheric pressure, vacuum is created, this will move backward. The diaphragm movement is transmitted through the vacuum advance arm connected through the movable breaker plate. So, this is the vacuum advance arm. So, this moves back when the vacuum is created, and therefore, it is, so this moves back, and once it moves back, what will happen? This will go up, and once this goes up, then the timing will change, right. So, it operates independent of the centrifugal advance mechanism. The maximum pressure of the compressed mixture should occur when the piston is about to commence its downward stroke and very close to TDC in an engine. So, we want to have maximum pressure after TDC, and as I have told you, half of the pressure rise should happen before TDC, half should happen after TDC, but again the peak should be as close as possible to the TDC. If the spark occurs too late, a part of the power is lost because the expansion stroke has already begun. Okay. Usually the spark advance is kept around 15 degree. There are various factors which affect the ignition timing. The type of fuel affects the ignition timing, mixture strength, air fuel ratio is going to affect the spark timing, part load operation or full load operation is going to determine what is the spark timing, engine speed, effect of ignition timing on the exhaust emission. So, all these parameters are going to control the or have effect on the spark timing. Now, type of fuel. So, there could be some fuels which are slow burning, there could be some fuels which are fast burning. If they are slow burning fuels, then you have to advance the spark timing. If they are fast burning fuel, then you have to retard the spark timing. For example, if you take methane, natural gas is a slow burning fuel. So, you have to advance the spark timing. If you replace it with hydrogen, hydrogen is very fast burning time. If you go with the same spark timing, the peak pressure will occur before top dead center. So, you have to retard the spark timing, bring it closer to TDC in the compression stroke. Okay. Mixture strength, in general rich mixtures burn faster, hence they require less spark advance. If you have lean mixture the mixture flame velocity is less. So, if you are working with lean mixtures, you have to advance the spark timing. If you are working with homogeneous mixture, rich mixtures, you have to homogeneous mixture, then flame speed is high, so you have to retard the spark timing. Okay. Part load operation, due to throttling, a smaller amount of charge enters the cylinder, dilution occurs and residual gases are also greater. The spark advance must be increased in order to overcome the slower burning rates caused by the less and diluted charge. Now, you see here, this is the timing advance, this is the standard timing, and this is the emission control timing. Basically, this is advance. So, advance means what? Which stroke is this? This will be compression stroke, and this will be expansion stroke. This is the standard timing. So, retarding the ignition timing during idling ensures higher temperature. which in turn ensure complete burning of the hydrocarbons in the exhaust manifold. So if you retard, bring it closer to TDC or maybe slightly after TDC, this will make sure that temperatures are high, so hydrocarbons will burn. But there could be more NOx. Fuel efficiency, since fuel efficiency is reduced if you retarded ignition timings require slightly higher throttle opening to maintain same idle speed, which increases the possibility of better mixing. So basically you have to optimize the spark timings based on your performance requirement. What is the efficiency requirement? What is the emission requirement? Because spark timing are going to affect the performance as well as emissions. Okay. The spark timing are going to affect what will be the peak temperature in the combustion chamber. Peak temperature in the combustion chamber is going to affect how much will be hydrocarbon emission, how much will be carbon monoxide emission, how much will be oxides of nitrogen emissions, right? So all these things are affected, and this is also going to determine how much fraction of the fuel will burn completely and how much fraction of the fuel will go unburnt out of the cylinder, right? So spark timings are therefore very, very important, and when you have to optimize them, keeping in mind your performance and emission requirements, okay? So I think with this I complete the chapter on the ignition systems applicable to spark ignition engine. Thank you very much.